You burned my name. Now I'll write yours in fire.
You're a burden now, Sam. Jesse's words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest as I sat in my wheelchair watching her brothers Dean and Mark toss my belongings into cardboard boxes with all the care of the garbage collectors. My vintage baseball card collection, the one I'd spent 20 years building, landed in a heap next to my old work boots. The boots I'd never wear again. Jesse, come on, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We can work this out. I know things have been tough since the accident, but tough? She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Tough doesn't begin to cover it, Sam. You can't work. You can't even get up the stairs to our bedroom. What exactly are you bringing to this marriage? Dean, her older brother, straightened up from where he'd been packing my tools. He was a big guy, all muscle and no brain, with hands like ham hocks and a perpetual sneer. Face it, wheelchair boy. You're dead weight now. Jessie deserves better than being stuck with a cripple for the rest of her life. The word hit me like a physical blow, but I'd learned to take hits. 6 months ago, I'd been Sam Morrison, successful contractor, owner of Morrison Construction. I'd built half the new houses in Milltown, this faded post-industrial city where rust and dreams went to die together. Then a drunk driver ran a red light, and everything changed. 3 surgeries later, the doctors delivered their verdict. I'd never walk again. Watch your mouth, Dean, I said quietly. Mark, the younger brother, but somehow even dumber, snorted. Or what? You gonna chase us down? They both laughed. Jessie didn't even look embarrassed. I wheeled myself closer to the window and saw Mrs. Klein from next door pretending to water her already drowning petunias while she watched the show. Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning when she spotted me. Nothing made that old gossip happier than fresh drama to spread around town. The house papers are already filed, Jessie said, not meeting my eyes. My name's on the deed, too, and since you can't work anymore, I'm the only one making payments. The lawyer says it's a clean separation of assets. What lawyer? I asked. Mine, Dean said with a grin. Buddy of mine from high school. Real sharp guy. I almost laughed. Dean's high school buddy was probably about as sharp as a bowling ball, but I kept that observation to myself. Instead, I watched them work, cataloging every detail. Dean's new truck in the driveway, a shiny red Ford F-150 that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Mark's expensive watch, the kind that screamed, I'm trying too hard. And Jesse's new clothes, designer stuff that definitely wasn't in our budget when I was paying the bills. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. Jesse finally looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married 8 years ago. Then it was gone. That's not my problem anymore, Sam. You're a grown man. Figure it out. Mark wheeled out my toolbox, my grandfather's toolbox, the one he'd given me when I started my apprenticeship. He dumped it on the front lawn with a crash that sent wrenches and screwdrivers scattering across the grass. Careful with that, I said. Or what? Mark repeated his brother's earlier taunt. Or nothing, I said. Just remember that some things are harder to fix than others. Something in my tone made him pause, but Dean was already pushing my wheelchair toward the door. Time to go, Sam. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I let them push me outside, where Mrs. Klein was now openly staring. A few other neighbors had gathered too, drawn by the commotion. The Hendersons from across the street, old Mr. Garcia from the corner house. Even some kids on bicycles had stopped to watch the show. Dean lifted my wheelchair off the porch and set it down on the sidewalk with a thud that rattled my teeth. Then he tossed my duffel bag after me. It landed in the street, spilling clothes across the asphalt. There you go, he said. All moved out. I sat there for a moment, taking it all in. The house I'd renovated with my own hands. The garden where Jesse and I had planted roses on our first anniversary. The neighbors watching my humiliation like it was primetime television. Then I started laughing. It wasn't funny, not really, but sometimes when life hits you with everything it's got, laughter is the only response that makes sense. I laughed until tears ran down my face, until Dean and Mark started looking uncomfortable, until even Mrs. Klein stopped pretending to water her plants. You think this is funny? Jessie asked from the doorway. Hilarious, I said, wiping my eyes. You want to know what's really funny? You think you've got this all figured out. You and your brilliant brothers and your high school lawyer buddy. We do have it figured out, Dean said. Sure you do. I gathered up my scattered clothes and stuffed them back in the bag. Good luck with the house sale, by the way. What's that supposed to mean? Mark asked. I just smiled and started wheeling myself down the street. Behind me, I heard Jesse's voice, sharp with sudden worry. What did he mean about the house sale? But I was already rolling away, my duffel bag balanced on my lap, heading toward the only place I had left to go. My mother's apartment on the other side of town, in the part of Milltown where the American dream had gone to die a slow, painful death. The sun was setting, painting the sky the color of rust and regret. Perfect weather for a new beginning. My mother's apartment smelled like menthol cigarettes and disappointment. She'd quit smoking 5 years ago, but the scent had soaked into the walls like a permanent reminder of better times. She didn't say much when I showed up at her door with my wheelchair and my garbage bag of belongings. Just made up the couch and heated some soup. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, but I could hear the worry in her voice. At 72, she was living on Social Security and part-time work at the grocery store. She couldn't afford to support a grown man, even if that man was her son. "It won't be long," I promised. The next morning, I wheeled myself downtown to Milltown's tiny business district. Half the storefronts were empty, their windows covered with newspaper and for rent signs that had been there so long they'd faded to gray. But there were still a few places hanging on, including Emily's bookstore. Page Turner Books occupied a narrow building between a pawn shop and a check-cashing place. Emily Chen had inherited it from her grandmother and somehow managed to keep it alive in an age when most people bought their books online. She was about my age, quiet and observant. With dark hair she kept in a practical ponytail and eyes that missed nothing. The bell above the door chimed as I wheeled inside. Emily looked up from behind the counter where she was sorting through a stack of used paperbacks. "Sam," she said, and her voice carried genuine warmth. "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry. News travels fast in Milltown. Mrs. Klein was in here 20 minutes after it happened, buying a romance novel and spreading gossip." Emily set down the books. "How are you holding up?" "Been better," I admitted. "Been worse, too, I suppose." She came around the counter and pulled up a chair so we could talk at eye level. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than she probably knew. Most people either looked down at me now or avoided eye contact altogether. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Honestly, I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting to think Jessie and her brothers might have bitten off more than they can chew." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" I'd known Emily for years, but we'd never been close friends. She was the quiet type, the kind of person who observed more than she spoke, but she'd always been kind to me, and right now, kindness was in short supply. "Can I trust you with something?" I asked. "Of course. The house they just threw me out of? It's not legally theirs to sell. When I bought it, I put it in a trust. Jessie's name is on some of the paperwork, but she can't transfer ownership without my signature. Dean's high school lawyer buddy apparently didn't do his homework." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "So they're stuck," I finished. "They can't sell it, can't refinance it, can't do anything with it. And the mortgage payments are due in 2 weeks. But won't they just come back to you for the signature?" I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "They'll try, but I'm not feeling particularly cooperative these days." Emily was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then she said, "My brother Ben is a lawyer, not like Dean's buddy. He actually passed the bar exam. He specializes in family law and divorce cases. I don't know if I can afford a lawyer right now." "Talk to him," Emily said. "He owes me some favors, and he doesn't like bullies. Plus, he works on contingency for cases he believes in." She wrote down an address on a piece of paper. "His office is above the diner on Main Street. Tell him I sent you." I pocketed the address. "Why are you helping me, Emily?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she said, "Because some people deserve better than what they get. And because I've never liked Jessie Morrison." "Why not?" "That's a story for another time," she said. "But let's just say your wife isn't as innocent as she pretends to be." I left the bookstore with more questions than answers, but for the first time since the accident, I felt something other than despair. I felt curious. And curiosity, I was beginning to realize, could be a dangerous thing. Ben Chen's office was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town lawyer who worked on contingency. Cramped, cluttered, and smelling faintly of coffee and desperation. But Ben himself was sharp. He was younger than Emily, maybe early 30s, with the kind of intense focus that comes from growing up hungry and staying that way. "Emily says you need help with a divorce," he said after I'd wheeled into his office. "I need help with a lot more than that." I told him everything: the accident, Jesse's change in behavior, the eviction, the house situation. Ben took notes on a yellow legal pad, asking sharp questions that showed he was thinking several steps ahead. The trust situation is interesting, he said when I finished. But if you really want to understand what's going on, we need to follow the money. Your wife's brothers didn't just decide to help her out of the goodness of their hearts. Someone's paying for this. What do you mean? Dean's new truck, Mark's expensive watch, Jesse's designer clothes. Your wife was a part-time receptionist at a dental office, right? That's maybe $25,000 a year. Where's the money coming from? I hadn't thought about it that way, but he was right. What do you suggest? I suggest we do some digging. Legally, of course. Financial records, phone records if we can get them, maybe some surveillance. Surveillance? Ben grinned, and for a moment he looked exactly like his sister. Emily didn't tell you? I used to be a private investigator before I went to law school. Old habits die hard. 3 days later, Ben called with information. Your wife has been busy, he said. 3 large cash deposits in the last 2 months, each one just under the reporting limit. Someone's been very careful about avoiding attention. Any idea where the money came from? Working on it, but I've got something else that might interest you. Jesse's been spending a lot of time at the Milltown Motor Lodge, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon for the past 6 weeks. The Milltown Motor Lodge was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. It sat on the edge of town like a guilty secret, all peeling paint and broken dreams. You think she's having an affair? I think we should find out, Ben said. You up for a little field work? That Thursday afternoon found me parked across the street from the motel in Ben's beat-up Honda, my wheelchair folded in the back seat. We'd been there for an hour when Jessie's car pulled into the parking lot. She wasn't alone. The man who got out of the passenger side was tall and athletic, with the kind of tan that comes from spending time outdoors. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him until he turned toward our car. Son of a witch, I whispered. You know him? Ben asked. That's Rick Valdez. He was my business partner. The pieces started falling into place. Rick had been pushing me to sell Morrison Construction even before the accident. He'd said it was because the market was changing, that we needed to get out while we could still make a profit. I'd refused, and we'd argued about it right up until the day I ended up in the hospital. When did you sell your share of the business? Ben asked. I didn't. The partnership agreement has a disability clause, but it requires both partners to agree to dissolution. Ben was already pulling out his phone. We need to get closer. Can you handle your chair on that gravel? I can handle it. We made our way across the street, using the cover of parked cars to get within earshot of room 12. The door was thin, and voices carried. Told you this would work, Rick was saying. Sam never reads the fine print. He signed the papers thinking they were insurance forms. But what if he finds out? That was Jesse's voice, worried and high-pitched. He won't. And even if he does, what's he going to do about it? He's stuck in that wheelchair, broke, and homeless. Who's going to believe him over us? Dean says we should have just waited for the divorce to go through. Your brothers are idiots, Jesse. This way is cleaner. We get the business, the house, everything. Sam gets nothing, which is exactly what he deserves. I felt Ben's hand on my shoulder holding me back. Good thing, because I was ready to kick down that door and show Rick exactly what this wheelchair-bound man could do. Instead, I watched through the window as my wife kissed my former business partner. Watched them laugh about how easy it had been to fool me. Watched them plan their future with my money. We've got enough, Ben whispered. Let's go. But as we were backing away from the window, my wheel caught on a loose piece of gravel. The scraping sound was small, but in the quiet afternoon air, it might as well have been a sharp crack. The voices inside the room stopped. What was that? Jesse asked. I'll check, Rick said. Ben grabbed the handles of my wheelchair and pushed fast. We made it around the corner of the building just as the door opened. I heard Rick's voice calling out, Hello? Anyone there? We waited, pressed against the brick wall, until we heard the door close again. Then Ben pushed me back toward his car as quickly and quietly as possible. That was close, he said once we were safely across the street. Too close, I agreed. But I was smiling. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my situation. So what's the plan? Ben asked. I thought about it as we drove back toward town. Jesse and Rick thought they'd won. They thought I was beaten, broken, ready to roll over and accept whatever scraps they decided to throw me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Red's boxing gym occupied the basement of an old brick building on the wrong side of Milltown's downtown district. The sign outside had been faded for so long that you had to know what it said to read it. But inside, the gym was alive with the sound of leather hitting bags and feet dancing on canvas. Red O'Malley had been running the place for 30 years. He was pushing 60 now, his red hair gone gray and his face marked with the kind of scars that come from a lifetime of fighting. But his eyes were still sharp, and his voice still carried the authority of a man who'd never backed down from anything. "Sam Morrison," he said when I wheeled through the door. "Heard you were having some troubles." "You could say that." Red had been a friend of my father's back when Dad was still alive. He'd taught me to box when I was 12, after some older kids had decided I was an easy target. The lessons had stuck, even if I couldn't use them the same way anymore. "You here to train?" he asked. "Can't exactly spar anymore, Red." "Boxing's not just about your legs, son. It's about your mind, your heart, your will to fight back when the world tries to knock you down." He gestured to my wheelchair. "Seems to me you're still fighting." I spent the next hour watching other people work out, listening to the rhythm of the gym, remembering what it felt like to be strong. Red sat beside me, occasionally calling out advice to his fighters, but mostly just keeping me company. "So what's the plan?" he asked eventually. "Plan? Don't play dumb with me, Sam. I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. You've got that look in your eyes, the same one you had when Tommy Brennan was picking on you in 7th grade. I smiled, remembering. Tommy had been twice my size and mean as a snake. He'd made my life heck for 3 months until I'd finally had enough. The fight had lasted about 30 seconds, but it had ended with Tommy on the ground and me standing over him. "Tommy learned not to underestimate people," I said. "That he did. Question is, what are Jessie and her friends going to learn?" I told Red about the motel, about Rick and the business, about the house they couldn't sell. He listened without comment, occasionally nodding. "You're going to need help," he said when I finished. "I've got Ben and Emily. You're going to need more than a lawyer and a bookstore owner. You're going to need someone who knows how to handle Dean and Mark when they figure out what you're up to." "You volunteering?" Red grinned, and suddenly he looked 20 years younger. "Son, I've been waiting for an excuse to teach those two some manners for months. Dean's been coming around here, trying to start trouble with my fighters. Thinks because he's big, he's tough. And Mark? Mark's just stupid enough to follow his brother into anything. But stupid can be dangerous too." The next morning, Ben called with more information. "I've been digging into the financial records." He knitted. "The money in Jesse's account, it came from Morrison Construction. Rick's been paying himself consulting fees and funneling the money to your wife. Can we prove it? We can prove the money trail, but we need to prove fraud, and that's trickier. Unless what? Unless we can get them to admit it. On record." I thought about the conversation we'd overheard at the motel. What if we could get them to repeat what they said yesterday? That would work, but it would have to be admissible in court, which means we'd need their consent to record, or we'd have to do it in a public place where there's no expectation of privacy. An idea was forming in my mind. Dangerous and probably stupid, but potentially effective. What if we made them come to us? How? Leave that to me. That afternoon, I wheeled myself to the Milltown Diner, a place where everyone in town eventually showed up for coffee and gossip. Mrs. Klein was already there, holding court at a corner table with 3 other neighborhood women. Perfect. I ordered coffee and positioned myself at the counter where everyone could see me. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call. "Emily, it's Sam. Yeah, I'm at the diner." "What? Oh, the house thing? Yeah, that's all sorted out now. Turns out Jessie and her brothers made a big mistake. No, they can't sell it without my signature, and I'm not signing anything. What am I going to do? Well, I'm thinking of moving back in. It is half mine, after all." I spoke just loud enough for Mrs. Klein to overhear, which meant the entire town would know within an hour. Then I finished my coffee and wheeled home to wait. I didn't have to wait long. Dean showed up at my mother's apartment that evening, his face red with anger. Mark was with him, looking confused as usual. "We need to talk," Dean said. "About what?" "About the house. Jessie says you're planning to move back in." "It's my house, too," I said reasonably. "Why shouldn't I live there?" "Because you don't belong there anymore," Mark said. "Jessie doesn't want you there. What Jessie wants and what she's legally entitled to are 2 different things." Dean stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. "Look, wheelchair boy, we can do this easy or we can do it hard. But one way or another, you're going to sign those papers." "What papers?" The ones that transfer your share of the house to Jesse. I don't recall seeing any such papers. You will, Dean said. Tomorrow, and you're going to sign them. Or what? Or we'll make you sign them. I looked up at him, this big, stupid man who thought physical size was the only kind of strength that mattered. You know what, Dean? I don't think you will. What? I think you're all talk. I think you and your brother are a couple of cowards who pick on people in wheelchairs because you're too scared to face anyone who can fight back. Dean's face went purple. You want to test that theory? Actually, I do. Tomorrow night, Red's gym, you, me, and anyone else who wants to watch. We'll settle this like men. Mark laughed. You're in a wheelchair, idiot. So, scared? The challenge hung in the air between us. Dean was trapped now, caught between his need to look tough and his growing realization that he might be walking into something he didn't understand. Fine, he said finally. Tomorrow night, but when I'm done with you, you're signing those papers. We'll see about that. After they left, my mother came out of the kitchen where she'd been listening. Sam, what are you doing? What I should have done months ago, Mom. I'm fighting back. The next evening, Red's gym was packed. Word had spread through Milltown like wildfire. The crippled contractor was going to fight Dean Morrison. It was the kind of spectacle that brought out everyone from curious teenagers to old-timers who remembered when disputes were settled with fists instead of lawyers. Dean showed up with Mark and 3 other guys I didn't recognize. Jessie wasn't with them, which was probably smart on her part. Rick was nowhere to be seen either. You ready for this? Red asked me quietly. As ready as I'll ever be. Dean stripped off his shirt, showing off muscles built more for show than function. He was strong, I'd give him that, but he moved like a man who'd never been in a real fight. How's this supposed to work? He asked, gesturing at my wheelchair. However you want it to work, I said. You can stand, I'll sit. Seems fair to me. The crowd formed a rough circle around us. Someone had brought a phone to record the fight, which was exactly what I'd been hoping for. Dean came at me like I expected, all aggression and no technique. He threw a wild right hand that would have taken my head off if it had connected. But I'd been watching him, studying his movements, and I knew he'd telegraph his punches. I leaned left, grabbed his wrist as his fist went past my ear, and used his own momentum to pull him off balance. He stumbled forward, and I drove my other fist into his solar plexus. Dean doubled over, gasping. The crowd went quiet. Come on, Dean, I said. I thought you were going to make me sign those papers. He straightened up, his face red with embarrassment and anger. This time he tried to grab me, probably planning to tip over my wheelchair. But I was ready for that too. I caught his reaching hands and pulled him down while pushing back with my legs. The wheelchair rolled backward, and Dean found himself bent over at an awkward angle, off balance and vulnerable. I could have hit him then, could have ended it quickly. Instead, I let him go and rolled back out of range. What's wrong, Dean? Having trouble with the cripple? The third time he came at me, he was desperate and sloppy. I caught his punch, twisted his arm, and used the leverage to flip him over my lap. He hit the gym floor hard, and this time he didn't get up right away. Stay down, I advised him. You're embarrassing yourself. But Dean wasn't smart enough to stay down. He got to his feet, his face twisted with rage, and reached for a metal folding chair. That's when Red stepped in. That's enough, the old boxer said quietly. But there was steel in his voice, and Dean froze. He humiliated me! No, Red said. You humiliated yourself. Now get out of my gym before I forget I'm too old for this nonsense. Dean looked around at the crowd, saw the expressions on their faces, and realized he'd lost more than just a fight. He'd lost respect, credibility, the fear that had been his primary tool for controlling people. This isn't over, he said to me. Yes, it is, I replied. And Dean, tell Jesse I said hi. After the crowd dispersed, Red helped me clean up a split lip I'd gotten when Dean's second punch had grazed me. Feel better? He asked. Actually, yeah, I do. Good, because now the real work begins. He was right, of course. Humiliating Dean in public was satisfying, but it didn't solve my real problems. Jesse and Rick still had my business, still had most of my money, still thought they were going to get away with it. But now I had something I hadn't had before. Momentum. And in a small town like Milltown, momentum could be everything. The next morning, Ben called with news. Someone uploaded a video of your fight to social media, he said. It's already got 3,000 views. Is that good or bad? Depends on your perspective. The comments are interesting, though. Seems like Dean and Mark aren't as popular as they thought they were. What do you mean? People are sharing stories about times Dean bullied them, or Mark ripped them off, Or Jesse was rude to them at the dentist's office. It's like the whole town was just waiting for someone to stand up to them. I thought about that as I got ready for the day. In a place like Milltown, reputation was everything, and reputations, once damaged, were hard to repair. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Sam, this is Dr. Peterson from the dental office where Jesse works. What can I do for you, Doc? Well, it's more what I can do for you. See, I've been hearing some interesting stories about my receptionist and her family, and I thought you might want to know that Jesse's been using my office phone to make personal calls. Long-distance calls to lawyers and banks and such. That's interesting. I keep records of all calls made from the office. For tax purposes, you understand. I'd be happy to share those records with you, purely for business reasons, of course. That's very generous of you, Dr. Peterson. Well, I've always believed in doing the right thing. And between you and me, Sam, I never did like that woman's attitude. After I hung up, I sat in my wheelchair and smiled. The dominoes were starting to fall, and once they started, they'd be almost impossible to stop. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Emily was waiting for me when I arrived at the bookstore the next morning. She had that look on her face, the one that meant she'd been thinking about something all night and had come to a decision. "We need to talk," she said, flipping the sign on the door to "closed." "Sounds serious?" She led me to the back of the store, where she kept a small office, barely big enough for a desk and 2 chairs. The walls were covered with old photographs of Milltown from better days, when the factories were still running and people had hope for the future. "I wasn't completely honest with you the other day," she began, "when you asked why I didn't like Jesse, okay?" Emily sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap. 5 years ago, my grandmother was still running the store. She was 87, but sharp as a tack. She'd been here for 40 years, knew everyone in town, extended credit to families who needed it. I waited for her to continue. Jesse came in one day with a story about needing books for a literacy program at the community center. Said they were starting a reading program for adults who'd never learned properly. She convinced my grandmother to donate $200 worth of books. Let me guess, there was no literacy program. There was no literacy program. Jesse sold the books online and kept the money. When my grandmother found out, she was heartbroken. Not because of the money, but because she'd trusted someone who lied to her face. Emily's voice was steady, but I could see the anger in her eyes. My grandmother died 6 months later, heart attack. The doctor said it was just her time, but I think losing faith in people contributed to it. She'd always believed the best about everyone. I'm sorry. The point is, Jesse's been running cons for years, small ones mostly. Nothing big enough to get her in serious trouble, but enough to make a living off other people's kindness. Why didn't anyone call her out on it? Because she was married to you. You had a good reputation in this town, Sam. People respected you. They figured if you trusted her, she must be okay. The irony wasn't lost on me. My reputation had been protecting the woman who was now destroying me. There's more, Emily continued. I've been asking around since we talked. Jesse's been telling people that you were harmful and controlling, that she stayed with you as long as she could, but after the accident, you became violent and unpredictable. That's a lie. I know it's a lie. But some people are starting to believe it. She's very convincing when she wants to be. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This was worse than I'd thought. It wasn't just about money or property anymore. Jesse was trying to destroy my reputation to make sure that even if I won in court, I'd lose in the court of public opinion. What else? She's been telling people that you threatened to hurt her if she left you, that Dean and Mark had to physically remove you from the house for her safety. And people believe this? Some do. Others are starting to have doubts, especially after what happened at the gym last night. But Jesse's good at playing the victim. She always has been. I thought about the video of my fight with Dean, now spreading across social media. In the right light, it could be spun as evidence of my violent tendencies. A disabled man lashing out at the people trying to help his wife. We need to be smarter about this, I said. Agreed, which is why I think it's time you knew about Rick's other business. What other business? Emily pulled out a manila folder from her desk drawer. I've been doing some research of my own. Rick Valdez isn't just stealing your construction company. He's been running a side business for the past 2 years. Cash only, no permits, no inspections. She handed me the folder. Inside were photographs, receipts, and what looked like a list of addresses. He's been doing renovations and repairs for cash, using Morrison construction tools and equipment, telling customers he works for your company, but keeping all the money for himself. I flipped through the documents. There were dozens of jobs, some of them substantial, bathroom renovations, kitchen remodels, even a few small additions. How did you get all this? I have my ways. The point is, Rick's been defrauding your customers and stealing from your business for years, even before your accident. This is enough to put him in prison. It's enough to destroy him, Emily agreed. But we need to be careful how we use it. If we just turn this over to the police, Jessie will claim she knew nothing about it. She'll play the innocent wife who was deceived by both her husband and his business partner. So what do you suggest? Emily smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely dangerous. I suggest we give them enough rope to hang themselves. That afternoon, I called Rick directly. He answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. Sam, I heard about your little performance at the gym last night. Word travels fast. In a town this size, everything travels fast. What do you want? I want to make a deal. There was a long pause. What kind of deal? The kind where we both walk away from this mess without destroying each other. Can you meet me tonight, somewhere private where we can talk? I don't know, Sam. Things are pretty complicated right now. They're about to get a lot more complicated if we don't work something out. Trust me on that. Another pause. Where? The old Morrison construction office. 8 o'clock. That building's been empty for months. I still have the keys. And Rick, come alone. This is between you and me. I hung up before he could respond. The Morrison construction office sat in a strip mall on the edge of town, between a nail salon and a tax preparation service that was only open 4 months a year. I'd built the business from nothing, starting with a pickup truck and a toolbox, growing it into something I was proud of. Now the windows were dark and there was a for lease sign in the door. I arrived early and let myself in through the back entrance. The office still smelled like coffee and sawdust, still had my father's picture on the wall, and the awards I'd won from the Chamber of Commerce. But everything else was gone. The computers, the files, the furniture. Rick had cleaned me out completely. I positioned myself behind the reception desk and waited. Rick showed up at 8:15 looking nervous. He was alone, as I'd requested, but I could see him checking the parking lot before he came inside. Sam, he said, you look good, considering. Considering you've been stealing from me for 2 years? His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. I pulled out Emily's folder and spread some of the photographs across the desk. Nice work on the Henderson bathroom, by the way, though I noticed you didn't pull permits for the electrical work. Rick stared at the photos like they were poisonous snakes. Where did you get these? Does it matter? The question is, what are we going to do about it? What do you want? I want my business back. I want my money back. And I want you to stay away from my wife. Jessie's not your wife anymore, Sam. She filed for divorce yesterday. On what grounds? Irreconcilable differences, plus the misuse allegations. What misuse allegations? Rick smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. The ones about how you threatened to end her if she left you. How you threw things at her when you got angry about being in the wheelchair. How she was afraid to sleep in the same house with you. That's all lies. Prove it. We stared at each other across the desk. Rick thought he held all the cards. He thought the misuse allegations would make me back down, would make me accept whatever scraps he was willing to throw me. He was wrong. You know what, Rick? I don't think I want to make a deal after all. What? I started gathering up the photographs. I think I'll just turn all this evidence over to the district attorney and let him sort it out. Tax evasion, fraud, theft of services, you're looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. Wait. Rick's voice was sharp with panic. Let's not be hasty here. Why not? You've been hasty enough. Stealing my business, sleeping with my wife, spreading lies about me. Seems like haste is the order of the day. What do you want? I told you what I want, but the price just went up. How much? Everything. The business, the money, the house, and a full confession about the misuse allegations. I can't do that. Jessie will end me. Jessie's not your biggest problem right now. I am. Rick was sweating now, his confident facade cracking. Sam, be reasonable. We can work something out. Can we? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been planning to screw me over from the beginning, even before the accident. That's not true. Isn't it? You were pushing me to sell the business months before I got hurt. You had access to all our accounts, all our client information. You knew exactly what you were stealing. Rick's shoulders slumped. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? We were just going to buy you out. Fair market value. But then you refused to sell, and the accident happened, and Jesse said, what did Jesse say? She said you were never going to be the same, that you'd lost your edge, your drive, that the business would fail if we left you in charge. So you decided to take it away from me. We decided to save it, to keep it running, to preserve what you'd built by stealing it, by taking control when you couldn't. I looked at this man I'd once considered a friend, this person I'd trusted with my business and my livelihood. He actually believed what he was saying. He'd convinced himself that theft was salvation, that betrayal was kindness. You know what the really sad part is, Rick? What? If you'd just been honest with me, if you'd come to me and said you thought I needed help, we could have worked something out. I might have agreed to sell or to bring in a manager or to restructure the partnership. Would you have? We'll never know now, will we? Rick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, what happens now? Now you're going to sign some papers. What papers? I pulled out a document Ben had prepared. A full confession. Details about the side business, the stolen money, the forged signatures, everything. And if I don't, then I go to the police tomorrow morning. And I make sure every contractor in the state knows what you did. You'll never work in construction again. Rick read through the confession slowly, his face growing paler with each page. This will destroy me. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making it official. What about Jessie? What about her? She's not going to just let this go. She's got her brothers, and they're not as civilized as I am. Let me worry about Dean and Mark. Rick signed the confession with a shaking hand. When he finished, he looked up at me with something that might have been respect. You know, Sam, I always underestimated you. As people do. What happens to Jessie? That depends on Jessie. After Rick left, I sat alone in my old office for a while, looking at the signed confession. It was enough to destroy him, enough to get my business back, enough to clear my name of the misuse allegations. But it wasn't enough, not yet, because Jessie was still out there, still spreading lies, still trying to play the victim while she robbed me blind. And I wasn't done with her yet. The Milltown Community Center hadn't seen this much excitement since the high school basketball team made it to the state finals in 1907. Word had spread through town like wildfire. Sam Morrison was calling a public meeting to set the record straight. By 7 o'clock, every folding chair in the main hall was occupied, and people were standing along the walls. I'd spent 3 days preparing for this moment, working with Ben and Emily to make sure every detail was perfect. We'd sent formal invitations to everyone who mattered, the mayor, the police chief, the newspaper editor, the president of the Chamber of Commerce. We'd also made sure that certain other people received special invitations. Jessie sat in the third row, flanked by Dean and Mark. She was dressed conservatively, playing the part of the grieving wife who'd been forced to leave her harmful and controlling husband. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. It was a good performance. Rick wasn't there. He'd left town that morning, according to Ben's sources. Smart move on his part. I wheeled myself to the front of the room and positioned myself behind a small table where Ben had arranged several manila folders and a portable microphone. The crowd grew quiet, waiting. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been a lot of rumors going around town about me, about my wife, about what happened between us. I thought it was time you heard the truth. We've heard plenty of truth, Dean called out from his seat. About how you threatened Jessie, about how you became violent after your accident. Have you? I turned to look at him. That's interesting, Dean, because I have some recordings I'd like you to hear. I nodded to Ben, who started a digital recorder. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but the voices were clear enough. Told you this would work. Sam never reads the fine print. He signed the papers thinking they were insurance forms. But what if he finds out? He won't. And even if he does, what's he going to do about it? He's stuck in that wheelchair, broke and homeless. Who's going to believe him over us? The crowd erupted in murmurs. Jessie's face had gone white. That recording was made 6 days ago at the Milltown Motor Lodge, I said. The voices belonged to my wife and my former business partner, Rick Valdez. They were discussing how they'd forged my signature on documents transferring ownership of Morrison Construction. That's illegal, someone called out. Yes, it is, I agreed. But that's not all. I opened the first manila folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. These pictures show Rick Valdez performing construction work using Morrison construction equipment and materials. Work that was paid for in cash, with no permits pulled and no taxes paid. I held up the photos so the crowd could see them. The Henderson bathroom, the Martinez kitchen, the Wilson deck, All work that Rick claimed was being done by Morrison Construction, but all money that went directly into his pocket. How much money? The newspaper editor asked. According to the records we've compiled, approximately $80,000 over 2 years. The crowd was getting louder now, people talking among themselves, pointing at Jessie and her brothers. But I wasn't done. Now, you might be wondering how Rick was able to get away with this for so long. The answer is simple. He had help. I opened the second folder and pulled out bank statements. These are copies of deposits made to accounts belonging to Jessica Morrison. 3 deposits of $9,000 each, all made in the past 2 months, all from Rick Valdez. So what? Mark called out. Maybe he owed her money. Maybe, I said. Or maybe she was being paid to help him steal from me, to distract me, to keep me from asking too many questions about the business. I pulled out another document. This is a signed confession from Rick Valdez, acknowledging the theft, the forgery, and the conspiracy. He's also admitted that the misuse allegations against me were fabricated to prevent me from fighting back. Jessie stood up, her face flushed with anger. That's a lie. Rick would never... Never what, Jessie? Never betray someone who trusted him? Never lie to save his own skin? Because that's exactly what he did. You're making this up, am I? I opened the third folder. These are phone records from Dr. Peterson's dental office. Where you work. Or worked, I should say. Dr. Peterson fired you this morning after he discovered you'd been using his phone to coordinate your little scheme. I held up the phone records. 47 calls to Rick Valdez in the past month, 16 calls to lawyers, 8 calls to banks, all made during business hours, all on Dr. Peterson's dime. The crowd was buzzing now, people turning to stare at Jessie. She looked around desperately as if searching for support, but found none. You want to know what really happened? I continued. I'll tell you. My wife decided she didn't want to be married to a man in a wheelchair, so she conspired with my business partner to steal everything I owned. They forged my signature, they stole my money, and when I started asking questions, they made up stories about me being harmful and controlling. That's not true, Jessie shouted. You did threaten me. You said you'd make me pay if I left you. Did I? I pulled out my phone. That's funny, because I have recordings of every conversation we've had since the accident, including the one where you threw me out of my own house. I played another recording, this one of Jessie's voice saying, You're a burden now, Sam. You can't work. You can't even get up the stairs to our bedroom. What exactly are you bringing to this marriage? The crowd had gone completely silent now. Even Dean and Mark seemed stunned. You want to hear more? I asked. I've got hours of recordings. Jessie talking about how pathetic I am. Rick discussing how easy it would be to take over the business. Dean and Mark planning to intimidate me into signing papers. You can't record people without their permission, Dean protested. Actually, I can, Ben said, standing up. New York is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, it's legal. The point is, I continued, everything you've heard about me being harmful and controlling, about me being violent, about me being a threat to anyone, is a lie, and the only thing I'm guilty of is trusting people who didn't deserve it. Jessie was crying now, but they weren't the calculated tears she'd been shedding earlier. These were tears of rage and humiliation. You bastard, she hissed. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so much better than everyone else. No, Jessie. I just think I'm better than thieves and liars. You want to know the truth? She screamed. The truth is that I never loved you. I married you because you had money and a successful business. And when you became a cripple, you weren't useful to me anymore. The crowd gasped. Even Dean and Mark looked shocked at their sister's outburst. There it is, I said quietly. The truth. Finally. Jessie realized what she'd done, but it was too late. She'd confessed to a room full of people, including the newspaper editor, who was frantically taking notes. I want a divorce, she said, her voice shaking. I want out of this marriage. You'll get your divorce, I said, but you won't get a penny from me. In fact, you're going to pay me back every dollar you stole. I don't have the money. Then you'd better get a job. A real job this time, not one that involves stealing from your employer. The police chief, who'd been sitting quietly in the back, stood up. Sam, do you want to press charges? I looked at Jessie, at Dean and Mark, at the crowd of people who'd watched my humiliation and were now witnessing my vindication. Yes, I said. I want to press charges for theft, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. All of them. You can't do this to us, Mark protested. We're family. No, I said. You're criminals, and criminals belong in jail. The police chief nodded to his deputies, who moved toward Jessie and her brothers. The crowd parted to let them through. This isn't over, Sam, Dean shouted as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Yes, it is, I said. It's been over since the day you underestimated me. As they were led away, the crowd began to disperse. People came up to me, shaking my hand, apologizing for believing the lies, offering their support. Mrs. Klein, the neighborhood gossip who'd started so many rumors, actually had tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Sam, she said. I should have known better. It's okay, Mrs. Klein. We all make mistakes. Emily appeared at my side as the hall emptied out. How do you feel? Tired, I admitted, but good. Like I can finally move forward. What's next? Next, I rebuild. The business, my reputation, my life. All of it. Need any help? I looked at her, this quiet woman who'd stood by me when everyone else had believed the lies. Actually, yes. Morrison Construction is going to need a new office manager. Someone trustworthy, someone smart, someone who knows how to spot a liar from a mile away. Emily smiled. I might know someone who fits that description. As we left the community center together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be legal battles, financial struggles, the slow work of rebuilding trust and reputation, but I was ready for it. Because I'd learned something important in the past few weeks. I'd learned that being knocked down doesn't make you weak. What makes you weak is staying down. And I wasn't staying down anymore. 6 months later, Morrison Construction was back in business. We'd moved to a new office, hired 3 new employees, and taken on more work than we could handle. The insurance money from Rick's theft conviction had helped, but mostly it was word of mouth. People in Milltown respected someone who fought back, who didn't give up when things got tough. Jessie had pled guilty to conspiracy and received 2 years probation and an order to pay restitution. Dean got 6 months in county jail for intimidation and assault. Mark got community service and a suspended sentence, mostly because he was too stupid to be considered a real threat. Rick had disappeared completely. Rumor was he'd moved to Florida and was working as a handyman under an assumed name. I hoped he'd learned something from the experience, but I doubted it. As for me, I was doing better than I had in years. The wheelchair was still there, would always be there, but it wasn't the limitation I'd once thought it was. It was just another tool, like a hammer or a saw. Something to work with, not something to work around. Emily and I had grown closer over the months, our professional relationship gradually becoming something more personal. She still ran the bookstore, but she also handled the administrative side of Morrison Construction. She was good at both, and she made me laugh, which was something I'd forgotten how to do. One evening, as we were closing up the office, she asked me a question that had been on both our minds. Do you ever regret it, the way you handled everything with Jessie? I thought about it for a moment. No, they made their choices and I made mine. The only thing I regret is not seeing who they really were sooner. And now? Now I know better. Now I know that trust has to be earned, not given away freely. Is that a warning? I smiled. It's a promise. To both of us. Outside, the sun was setting over Milltown, painting the sky the colors of rust and gold. It was beautiful in its way. Even dying towns could have their moments of grace. I locked the office door and wheeled out to where Emily was waiting by her car. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new opportunities to build something worthwhile. But tonight, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was exactly where I wanted to be. With someone who saw me as I really was, not as what I used to be or what I might have been. Just Sam Morrison, contractor, survivor, fighter. The man who proved that being called a burden doesn't make you one.